It was a long weekend, and me, my girl Brenda, and my buddies Ted and Mathieu decided to hit up Brenda's parents' lakeside crib for a chill getaway. It was a cute little spot, nestled by the water, with just enough room for us to kick back and relax. It had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a living room, plus a boathouse leading straight to the lake with a little dinghy waiting to be taken for a spin. It sounded like the perfect recipe for a summer escape. After a 3-hour drive, we rolled up to the place, unpacked our gear, and figured, why not take the boat out for a sunset cruise while the day was still young? So we grabbed some fishing rods, hopped in the boat, and off we went. It was around 3 in the afternoon, the sun was shining, and the breeze was gentle, ideal conditions for a lazy afternoon on the water. Now, fishing wasn't exactly everyone's idea of a good time. Ted got antsy after a while and decided to take a dip. Next thing you knew, we were all splashing around like a bunch of kids. The water was just right, and the whole scene was straight out of a postcard. But then, out of nowhere, Brenda let out this little yelp. I was like, "Hey babe, you all right?" She brushed it off, saying she felt something tugging at her feet. Probably just a fish passing by. We shrugged it off and kept on enjoying ourselves. Fast forward a couple of hours. The sun was starting to set and we were getting ready to head back. We made it back to the house, whipped up a simple dinner, and spent the evening playing board games till the early hours. Sometime in the dead of night, I woke up thirsty as all heck. I figured I'd sneak off to the kitchen for a drink without waking Brenda. But when I glanced over at the bed, she was just sitting there, staring off into space. "Babe, why are you still up?" I asked, but she didn't even blink. I headed to the kitchen, and that's when I saw her again, or at least someone who looked like her, standing in the corner by the fridge, chowing down on a raw fish like it was no big deal. Now, we'd caught some fish earlier, but this wasn't the plan for dinner. And the way she was devouring it, it was like something out of a horror flick. I tried talking to her, touching her shoulder, but she was just vacant. Her eyes, man, they weren't right. No whites, just these dark animal-like pupils. I was thinking, is she possessed or something? It was freaky as hell. I hauled my ass back to the bedroom, woke up Ted and Mathieu and filled them in. Ted, being the horror buff he was, went full-on exorcist mode. We ended up tying Brenda to the bed. Not exactly how I imagined spending my night, let me tell you. Ted started reciting passages from a Bible we found lying around, splashing her with tap water like it was holy water straight from the Vatican. Meanwhile, the rest of us stood there, feeling like we'd stumbled into our own real-life horror movie. So there we were in the dead of night, Ted going full-blown exorcist on Brenda. He was reciting passages from the Bible, splashing her with tap water like it was the holiest stuff on earth, and waving a cross around like he was conducting some kind of twisted orchestra. Now, I wasn't one for superstition, but I'll admit, there was something eerie about the whole scene. Brenda was thrashing around, eyes rolling back, and for a moment, I was half convinced we'd stumbled into a real-life horror flick, but then slowly but surely something started to change. As Ted kept up his ritual, Brenda's movements became less frantic, more calm. It was like she was fighting against whatever had a hold on her, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I let myself breathe a little easier. Hours passed. Ted was still at it, and the rest of us were starting to feel the weight of exhaustion pressing down on us. But then, just as the first light of dawn started to creep through the windows, something shifted. Brenda's eyes flickered open, and for a moment there was a glimmer of recognition there. She looked around, confusion giving way to clarity, and then she reached out, like she was coming back to us from some far-off place. We untied her, and she sat up, rubbing at her wrists like she couldn't quite believe she was free. And in that moment, as the tension slowly started to bleed out of the room, I realized just how close we'd come to losing her. As we watched the first light of dawn filter through the curtains, relief washed over me like a soothing balm. Brenda was back with us, her eyes clear and filled with recognition once more. We sat there in the quiet of the morning, exhaustion weighing heavy on our shoulders, but grateful for the safety we now felt. Yet, even as I held Brenda close, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of my mind. Ted's exorcism had seemed to work, but there was a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't seen the last of whatever had taken hold of her. In the days that followed, life returned to normal, or at least as normal as it could be after an experience like that. But every now and then, when I looked into Brenda's eyes, I swore I saw something off. It was fleeting, just a brief flicker of something strange, but it was enough to send a shiver down my spine. I told myself it was just my imagination running wild, that I was letting the memory of that night play tricks on me. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Brenda's ordeal than any of us realized. And so, as the weeks turned into months, I found myself watching her closely, waiting for another glimpse of those strang, brown pupilled eyes. Because even though we'd banished whatever had haunted her that night, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, waiting, and that our battle was far from over. So this freaky tale. Yeah, it all went down when I was around 13, back when my parents used to drag us off to this lake house for summer breaks. Me and my little bro Jack, we loved messing around in the lake. Swimming, fishing, you name it. This place wasn't deep or anything, just your typical lake vibes with fishes, fogs, and the occasional duck. We were regulars there, knew the area like the back of our hands. So one sunny afternoon, we were all chilling by the lake, and suddenly our buddy Mike started hollering, "Hey, check out what I've hooked, think it's a big one." We all rushed over, eager to see this supposed big catch. After a bit of a struggle, we finally reeled it in, only to find out it wasn't your run-of-the-mill fish. Now, this thing was like part human, part fish. A mermaid gone wrong, if you ask me, ugly as sin with a wrinkly old face, razor-sharp teeth, and a twisted fishtail. It looked angry, like it had a bone to pick with us. And man, did it let out this creepy cry when our buddy Patrick started poking it with a stick. Jack, bless his soft heart, couldn't stand seeing the thing in pain. He told Patrick to lay off, but you know how kids can be. Sometimes they're just plain mean. Patrick, being Patrick, didn't listen and kept on poking, making the thing scream even louder. As the big bro, I had to step in. I yanked the stick from Patrick's hand, giving him a piece of my mind. We were all standing there, clueless about what to do with this messed up mermaid. Mike, the one who reeled it in, decided to take it home to show his folks. Next day, me and Jack headed back to the lake for a swim, but there was no sign of Mike or Patrick. We didn't think much of it, figured they were busy or off doing their own thing. A few days later, we heard they were both down with some nasty illness. Creepy stuff, right? My little bro, Jack, he had this gut feeling that the mermaid was behind it all, so we decided to pay Mike a visit and see if we could get some answers. We biked over to his place, not too far from our rental lake house. When we got there, Mike's folks welcomed us in even though we hadn't called ahead. They said Mike was resting up in his room, getting ready to head to a bigger hospital for a checkup. We promised not to stay too long and headed upstairs. Man, Mike looked like death warmed over. Pale, weak, barely holding it together. I tried to keep the mood light with some small talk, but Jack, he went straight for the jugular, asking about the mermaid. Turns out, Mike still had the thing, chilling in a bucket in his room. We checked it out and it looked weirdly alive considering. Mike admitted he'd fed it some worms at first, but then he got sick and forgot all about it. Jack suggested we take the mermaid back to the lake and set it free. Mike didn't care, so we grabbed the bucket and got the heck out of there. We released the mermaid back into the lake, made sure it vanished into the depths, and hoped for the best. A week later, we heard the news. Mike and Patrick were on the mend, getting better by the day. Jack and I were convinced it was because we'd lifted the curse of the mermaid. We swore to keep it a secret between us, and here we are, still keeping that spooky tale close to the chest.